Back in the summer of 2024, Time Team joined Operation Nightingale near the village of Cherrington in Gloucestershire to investigate an Anglo-Saxon cemetery. We spent a great week excavating a number of burials clustered together in the broken limestone subsoil, as well as a totally unexpected Romano-British roundhouse on the edge of the field.
Sitting on top of the timbers and completing this building.
And then, classic Time Team, there was a last-minute discovery.
Oh Lord, look at that. Well, it certainly looks like a long, wide piece of iron that has been buried in some kind of wooden container, which does kind of imply that it might be a sword in a scabbard, yes.
There was only time to rebury it, mark it and leave it, but we agreed to return as soon as we all could.
And then we'll carefully cover it over, and it'll have to be dealt with quite quickly.
Quite quickly, yes, I think so.
6 weeks later, we came back with a list of questions. Was it an early Anglo-Saxon sword? If so, was it in a warrior's grave? And how did that fit in with the other burials nearby? And this time, we had just 2 days to find the answers. Cherrington lies in the rolling hills of the Cotswolds in Gloucestershire, just 5 miles to the west of Cirencester. The team reconvened in high spirits with one simple mission: locate, identify and contextualise the mysterious metal object. If it was just a discarded piece of plough, we could all go home. But if it was an early Anglo-Saxon sword, we had our work cut out. We had just 2 days to understand its context, presumably a grave, discover who it was buried with, and work out what the relationship was with the rest of the cemetery.
10 minutes, then we'll come back.
See, that's just tantalising, that is.
And being Time Team, the weather forecast was atrocious.
Apparently storms are going to sweep through. We've got tents, but we've also got the wind. We've got waterproofs top to toe. We've got all the kit we could possibly want, but we're going to have to try to get through things as fast as we can before the weather turns.
First things first, we had to relocate the ferrous signal in order to position the trench. Graham Moore was the metal detectorist who discovered the object back in the summer.
Obviously, when we found it, sort of like last couple of hours of the previous dig, and we, potentially identified it of what it was. It was like, it was like umming and ahhing whether or not to lift it at the time. But, for us to cover it back up, obviously GPS and cover it back up, it's like I've had sleepless nights worrying that, it's, potentially being taken or dug up, but yeah, really excited to be back here.
But we can't just dig a hole and hoik the object out of the ground. Assuming it is a sword, we need to know what it's doing there. We need all the valuable information that might be held in the surrounding earth. The trench we've laid out is 3 metres by 2 metres, big enough to make sure that any grave cut we find is totally within it.
We've got the natural really nicely at the far end, so there's the feature coming across the middle, but I don't think we've got the end at this point, so that's why we've got the extension to get it all in the one trench.
So Matt put this in place so we can just see it now.
Oh, right, okay, so yeah. So you know when you're going to get to it.
Just for preservation, because we couldn't lift the artefact, Matt put a layer of plastic over it to try and preserve it.
Several Anglo-Saxon graves have already been discovered in this field, clustered in an area just 50 metres away. 4 of them featured in our Time Team documentary, A Princely Burial, the remains of a baby, a child, a woman and a young man. But the talking point of this cemetery was the discovery back in 2019 of the grave of a young boy. Although he was only around 8 to 10 years old, he was buried as a warrior, with a sword, 2 spears and a shield. So finding another Anglo-Saxon sword in this field would not be entirely surprising. But we are digging some distance from the known cemetery area. And our metal object could just as easily be a discarded piece of farm machinery. One thing is for sure, progress digging down through the broken limestone is heavy work and slow going.
You can just see it now.
Oh, right, okay, so yeah.
Eventually, Graham hits what he thinks is organic material.
Right, I'm going to step aside and let the conservator in.
Yeah, I think you just keep going.
Okay,
Just really gently.
Pieta Greaves is a professional conservator from Dracon Heritage.
Yeah.
Do you want me to move?
No, I can see it, Tone. You're the one wielding the tools, so yeah. Do it gently.
Yeah, I didn't have any pressure then.
No. There it is, there.
Yeah.
There it is.
16 people. What?
Right, there's a piece there as well, so it's... Do you want me to...
That's not metal. So yeah, be really careful because I think what you're seeing there is a little bit of wood that's being preserved.
Okay.
Like from the scabbard. Yeah, probably from the scabbard. So they're really iron objects are really good at preserving organics. So potentially the sword can preserve some of the scabbard as well. Sometimes you can get the leather as well preserving.
This could be a significant discovery. With the weather on the turn, the archaeology needs protection from the rain.
It's just after lunch, and so we've got a whole half day of this, and then they say that it's going to be even worse tomorrow.
This is the most important part of work going on site.
Yeah.
Because this is stopping them from getting out of the trench while it's a slight rain. So yeah, little irrigation ditch. I'll try and put a sump hole in at the end. And I hope I don't find anything while I'm doing it, because if we find another one, I'm not digging it.
I think that's further over.
What have you got there, Jackie?
Carefully removing the topsoil, Jackie makes a breakthrough.
It looks awfully like some bits of skull.
Bits of skull suggest this is a grave. And just a metre away, more human bone is uncovered.
Well, I think I've got the heel bone. So I've got the foot bones.
Excellent.
So I've got calcaneum, talus, the bottom end of the fibula. So yeah, we're in situ. We're in the grave, but it's incredibly shallow. Incredibly shallow. Shallower than I thought it was going to be.
We've now got human bones at both ends of a grave, bits of skull and foot bones. But there's a problem.
Looking at this, which is the distal end of your fibula, right, so that's the bit, the outside of your leg that joins your ankle, forms part of
your shin.
Yeah, part of your ankle at the side, right, and that is really quite small. It's fused, so it's an adult, so it's not a kid of any sort, but that is really quite small, which would suggest to me that this is going to be female.
Anglo-Saxon swords are only ever found in male burials, so finding female bones in this grave is confusing. And this is compounded by the discovery of 2 coins near the skull.
That's an unusual find in a more unusual find in a male grave. Do you think that is a match? You know, they're both.
Could be.
Yeah, it looks slightly thicker, but that might just be a corrosion issue. Maybe.
Yeah.
It certainly looks circular, doesn't it?
You know, I was just yesterday looking for a different find, looking at all the instances of Roman coins and Anglo-Saxon graves. Because the question yesterday was not what kind of grave are they in; it was how they've been modified to turn into pendants. I wasn't looking at whether they were male or female graves. And then you start thinking, well, 2 matching things near a head. It's beginning to look a bit like pendants on a necklace. But no, you can't possibly have a necklace in the grave of a man with a sword.
Only Anglo-Saxon women were buried with jewellery. So if this is a pendant and a female grave, then what is our mysterious metal find?
And if you're dressed up as a man in the Anglo-Saxon world, you're not going to be wearing jewellery like necklaces and brooches. You might be wearing jewellery like a big jewelled buckle, but you're not going to be wearing something that's just there to make you look beautiful.
Yeah.
If you want to look beautiful as a man, you have to do it through textiles. What we appear to have here is 2 circular copper alloy things which look a wee bit like coins made independence, a wee bit, but you don't have a necklace with a sword unless it's not a sword. Maybe it's a weaving sword.
Weaving swords were long iron tools that were used to beat rows of horizontal threads tightly together to create dense woven fabrics on a loom. We know that some were even made from old sword blades.
I wonder if that could explain why it's on one side rather than laid flat, because usually a sword in a scabbard is laid down the side of the body or possibly over the body, but it's laid flat. Where, I mean, it could have dropped obviously to one side.
Because everything's tipping in.
Everything's tipping in, but it's going to be interesting to see just what the orientation, the lay of all these materials are around the body.
Yes, it's funny, isn't it? We came here thinking we knew what we were getting.
Yeah.
And you never know.
No,
you never know.
The joys of archaeology.
Yeah.
No, it's just a bit few flags.
Well, of course, there is one other alternative.
What's that?
There's more than one person in here.
Oh, they'd have to be very, very snug, though.
Well, they're laid on one side. One of them, at least, is laid on one side.
Yeah, but as I keep saying, you know, if you measure front to back of Richard, that's a good foot. And then front to back of you as well. That's quite, you know. I don't want to do too much experimental archaeology, but if I lay Richard on his side and then put you in front of him on his side, then there's still quite a lot of you. I know it doesn't look like it when the flesh all decays, but it's
not liking where this is going.
But look at the width of this. Look, it goes from here to here.
Oh, okay.
That is actually quite a wide grave.
Because that
slipped
is
in a
fill.
bit. That slipped in a bit. So I think it's still open.
All bets are on still.
Still open.
There's nothing for it but to keep on digging.
I think that's stone, but ask Jackie. Jackie, have you got a moment? This is transforming into a little buckle.
Oh, hang on, let me move my knee. Oh gosh, that's awful on the knees. Oh, there it is, isn't it? How lovely.
What is that stone?
It looks kind of stony from here. Let me just have a wee look. I told you not to lean on any of this, and then I'm doing so, but I think that is stone, yeah, that's stone.
Okay. So what are we going to do if we've got a disc here and a buckle there and an ear?
Just really weird. Unless they folded some clothes or something up. Do you ever find evidence for that, where they folded clothes
Well,
up
yeah,
and put
but
them on
only
top?
in really major burials where they've got to pack a lot in. What are you insinuating?
This might be a major burial where they packed a lot in. Because that's really odd location to have a buckle.
Yeah, I'm just
If
trying to
that's
think
her
it through.
face.
If that's her ear, and then she's got a pendant out in front of her, and she's got
Face
a
would be
buckle.
here, right?
So it's either something that's detached, and therefore, so like a garment or a bag that's been folded and put in separately that she's not wearing, which could be true for a bag. Or it's something that has moved. So we won't know whether anything's moved until we see the whole tableau. But because this is worrying me as well. You see, if it's a bag, you could have just about anything. You could have a broken old knife. You could have just anything. A bag's full of toot, as we see it.
That has got to be whole earth recovered. We've got to keep all that soil,
Yes.
all of it.
Whole earth recovery means removing all the soil surrounding a find for analysis in the lab. But this approach slows the team down even more. At the end of the first day, we still have more questions than answers.
Well, it's the end of the first day of the second dig up here, and it's bizarrely sunny because it hasn't been like that today. But I think we've made decent progress.
I think we've made really good progress.
We started it as thinking it's going to have a sword, it's going to be a male burial, and that was the starting point from the day, wasn't
and
it?
a warrior burial.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd all looked at that little little preview of the sword
Yeah,
that
it
we
was
got,
just-
and we'd
just
all
that much, wasn't
agreed
it? Yeah.
that looked like a sword.
Yeah, the bone we're fairly happy is probably from a younger person. So
Yeah.
at the moment it could be a male, it could be a female, but the grave cut is big, isn't it?
Really big, and it's really neat.
The good thing is we know where the head is, we know where the feet are, and we know the kind of objects are beginning to emerge. So I think at least we've got the limits defined. So I think we can hit it at pace tomorrow, carefully.
We can hit the
And it could be
first.
very exciting. It could be really, really exciting, couldn't it?
If you're enjoying this episode, you can help us tell more fascinating stories like this one. It's your support that makes our coverage possible. Join a worldwide community of Time Team fans on Patreon. Day 2 dawns with a storm on the horizon. Richard splits the workforce into 2 teams in order to maximise focus and efficiency.
All good to go. So Jackie, we're going to have bone team on this side.
Yeah, we're going to have a bone digging team on this side. So Bryony, Graham are going to come down here. Bryony's going to start at the far end, but like I say, bearing in mind that we've got a teenager, so not everything's going to be fused. Having some sample bags ready to go, so just in case.
So the forecast from about 2 is meant to be less biblical. Right, on your edge.
Right.
While the first team makes sense of the bones, the other painstakingly excavates around what may or may not be a sword. More bones are uncovered, but everything seems to be in the wrong place.
It shouldn't be right down here. This should be one of the foot. It should be one of the 2 4. No, I think it's a radius actually. That looks like, looking at this distal end. Yeah, I think it's probably the radius, is that?
As more organics are identified on the iron object, Pieter casts doubt on the weaving sword theory.
And do you find weaving bettings and things like scabbards?
No.
No.
So you thought you saw wood?
Wood, yeah.
Yeah,
But
we have to think again. But in a way, it's so ridiculous trying to guess what's going to be there. It's impossible to guess what's going to be there. We just have to keep going. Yeah.
A sword just wouldn't fit with female bones, but a new discovery might have solved that problem.
Oh, right, okay. That looks like somebody else's head.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I said we might have a double.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a double.
Excellent.
And that's what those two.
A male body, in the same grave as a female, could explain the presence of a sword.
The hand over the sword.
But the bones are so jumbled up, we're struggling to work out what goes where.
I don't think this is going to be as straightforward as we hope.
Well, Jackie, it never is it? It never is.
Because that
Not a
looks...
single one with a sword, but no.
let's
There's
go
2
like
now
that.
in
'Cause that's what we're
acrobatic
looking at.
positions.
But that's like this. We're looking at this bit of the arm there, which is just odd. Because that's, So I'm not quite sure that, but yeah.
I mean, already, this morning the progress is amazing, isn't it? I mean, the fact that so much has been exposed, and so I think we're well on track.
Yeah, it is good, but it's not straightforward, and that's to find somebody's elbow immediately in front of their face on top of somebody else's head. This rib here looks like left rib, right? So it looks to be the rib cage here. But I found another side of what looks like left rib over here that's articulated.
Where's our second head? Could they be? Well, if you've got 2 rib cages, obviously they don't line up with the heads. But
No.
could one be going underneath the other at a different?
At a funny angle.
Angle?
It could be. I think we've just got to dig it.
The thing is that
It's not. Nothing's quite where I think it was going to be.
but that's making it slower, isn't it?
It's-
Because you can't just go where you're expecting everything to be anatomically. Anything could be anywhere.
Exactly. So that's why I'm sort of taking things off in layers, which is why I managed to stop before I went through that, because I was thinking that was going to be nothing there at all.
The buckle is becoming an obstruction, so it is lifted clear of the bones in a block of soil.
Well done.
Right, yeah, so half of them came out on a rock, but then the other rock is stuck underneath another rock.
This type of buckle was present throughout the early Anglo-Saxon era, so it can't help us to date the grave more tightly. It might have been used to fasten almost anything, from a belt to a shoe or even a bag. Meanwhile, the sword team are making good progress. But there don't appear to be any other weapons with the sword, something you might expect in a warrior's grave. The young prince, discovered 50 metres away, was buried with a sword, 2 spears, a knife and a shield. The team have also discovered that the sword is bent. Was this a symbolic act before burial? Or perhaps the result of the roof of a burial chamber collapsing? Either way, the sword has a major weakness and will be difficult to lift in one piece. But the team can't even think about lifting the sword before they've sorted out the mixed up male and female bones among the stones, and that is very slow going. In order to make more sense of body positions in the grave, Jackie and I get some help from conservation assistant Sophie Broadhurst.
Think about how you're asleep. It's best to be relaxed, darling. So you don't look terribly relaxed at the moment. What we don't know yet is where this arm is. But if you just think, now go forward, just think about sleep and how you might go to sleep, like that, and that is how, but that arm has gone down and it's a bit difficult to do.
Yes, now this is really interesting because, Sophie, your hand is sticking up
it's
quite
sticking
a long
up, where
way.
Actually that arm needs to go down that way.
But it doesn't go like that,
But it doesn't go like that easily.
No,
so
no.
I suspect, I'm trying to think, if you can think of it, Sophie, can you see how I'm doing? Sorry, I look like I'm doing the Hunchback of Notre Dame, I know, but if you think about doing that with your arm, yeah? And your elbow, but your elbow doesn't want to go that way, does it? Well, can I just try something out? If Sophie gets up, can I just try something out and see? If I was down here, right, and I was on a pillow like that.
Hang on. Oh, you've got to be on quite a big pillow.
Yeah, it could be quite a big pillow, but if I was like that.
Yeah, you know what you are? You're now looking much more like you're reclining. Put your head up. You look like you're on I, Claudius, and I'll give you a grape.
Thank you.
You know,
that's luncher. That'd
yes,
be really nice.
that's another thing. A different kind of three-dimensionality where you're up very high.
Yeah, much higher.
Yes.
And we forget we're looking at everything collapsed down.
Jackie's hypothesis about the body being raised could explain how it decomposed and collapsed over time, jumbling up the bones underground. And just when we thought this grave couldn't get any more complicated, Bryony discovers another metal object.
Oh, Lord, I hadn't actually seen that. I thought it was just a bit of root. I was just looking at that, focusing on that, and I'd edited that out. That's a tiny little foil of what I think is probably more likely to be pale gold than silver. So,
Don't do the gold.
So if that is something that's on its edge and all we're seeing is a very tiny edge of it, and it's quite large and it could be circular, it's quite long and it could be circular, so it could be quite deep. Do we want to clean around that to try to see as much as we can before it's lifted and then lift it? How would we lift it?
I think it just depends how it's intertwined with the skeleton. So we want to move the sword in front of it, I think, just carefully, and then move towards it.
Yeah, I'd like to get that. I think we need to get that cleared a little bit so we can see what it's in relation to, and you can see that if there's anything else associated with it other than that.
I think it's not an it. I think it's two things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
The metal object is sitting next to the woman's hip bones. But it can't be excavated until the jumble of bones and then the sword are lifted out of the way. So it's full steam ahead making sense of the bones. And Jackie makes a big discovery.
That is a femur.
That's very small.
That's a tibia, fibula. That's a child.
That's tiny.
That's a child that's laid down there.
Child
with the
squeezed
sword,
in.
Yeah, with the sword
Right next
to
it.
the young child, as opposed to the teenager.
That sword's almost as long as the child.
Yeah, so do you want to go away and think about that one? Because I know you like thinking about things like that.
Yes, well, I can immediately tell you that happens because a sword does not mean a warrior.
No.
But it is incredibly rare.
And we've already had one
yes.
little boy with a sword.
Now remind me, what was the age of the boy with the sword?
I think that was sort of 9 to 10-ish.
Yeah.
I think this is young. This little child is younger.
If this is a child's body, then the parallels with the young prince 50 metres away are impossible to ignore.
So
but of course we don't know till we see the whole thing.
Yeah.
We don't really know whether that's two people with combined grave goods, whether that sword really does go with the child, or whether the sword actually goes with the teenager and the child is put in as a somebody coming late to the party, so to
Yeah,
speak.
but it's interesting that the sword is almost laid over that youngster.
I think detail is going to be really important.
It is, I think with this one it is, yeah.
This is getting stranger and stranger because on this site we seem to have hardly any adults. So it all began with the richly furnished grave of a boy who was 9 or 10 years old. Now that's unusual in itself because a 9 or 10-year-old generally hasn't earned their place in society and they're not a fully fledged warrior, obviously. So what are they doing with a whole kit of war gear? Then we've got unfurnished children, which is more common. Children do they usually don't have very much with them. And maybe you could argue we were in a child's area of the cemetery down there, predominantly children, or maybe this is just maybe it's a terrible place or time to live and they did lose a lot of people early on in their life. But now here we are in what's appearing to be a richly furnished grave. The second person appears to be 8 or younger, and right next to an absolutely full-size, totally conventional sword. This is very, very unusual. It's not unprecedented. We know that Anglo-Saxons, when they're buried with war gear, it doesn't make them warriors. Sometimes they are disabled, they would have never been able to use their weapons, sometimes they're too young, sometimes they're too old. But a very strong pattern is coming up in this cemetery, which shows that it's a different place to other cemeteries. And again, that's not unprecedented. Cemeteries do have their own character. You might remember Bremer that we did for the Time Team Live in 2001. That was the most extraordinary place. It was absolutely full of buckets. No other early Anglo-Saxon cemetery has ever been so full of buckets. Maybe we've got another really peculiar place here. It's not just the burial place of an ordinary community. It's something different. Finally, the promised rain arrives.
Look, every time team I've done, we've had this weather, and I think it's cursed. I think there's some time team have upset somebody or something quite powerful.
I think I've still got them.
Yeah, I just like the wrist action. I think that is just so beautifully presented.
That's not the first time we've been told that, Barney. That's so cool, young man.
I've been racking my brains about what the curved metal object might be, and as more is exposed, the penny finally drops.
The iron thing looks very like the chain off the workbox.
Chain off a workbox.
The sheets looks like, oh, and of course that edge.
Now that edge.
Yes, now that edge works as a workbox. Yes, wow. That is such a remarkable find, such an extraordinary thing.
The workbox is sitting just above the hip bones at the young woman's waist. Rusted links from a chain indicate it would once have been suspended from a belt.
And do you only ever get them with female burials?
Yes.
Yes.
This is a 7th century woman. So I can now start talking about all sorts of other things.
Right.
Because this person was put in the grave in the second half of the 7th century. So I've got a date now, which I haven't been able to talk about all day because a sword means a different thing in the 7th century to in the 6th century.
Yeah.
So I've been hamstrung by that.
Anglo-Saxon workboxes are cylindrical containers sometimes found in women's graves. They can contain pieces of thread and cloth, so they were once thought to be sewing kits, hence the name. We now think that these textiles were more like Christian relics, making these containers reliquaries.
So this, my goodness, yes.
So have you got something? No pressure at all. And have you got something there for that is demonstrably female and pretty demonstrably male?
So the team now have a fragile workbox, a damaged sword, and 2 sets of bones to lift before the day is done. Before any of that can happen, Matt has to record everything in situ. Matt takes a series of overlapping photos that will be used to create a 3-dimensional model of the grave. Outside, however, the storm intensifies. With fragile archaeology at risk, everyone who can is rapidly diverting surface water away from the trench. Even the director drops his camera to help save the archaeology. It's sponges to the rescue.
Biblical.
The team start lifting the 2 skeletons as fast as they can.
That's why you're here. So this is right. So nobody knows.
The pressure then passes to Pieta, who has the unenviable task of lifting the bent sword.
It's a good moment now to have a last little look at this sword, which is the sword that brought us back to Cherrington. We got a little sneak preview of it in July, the middle of it, and we can now see it all in its entirety, that it has got a complete tang, which we were worried about a bit earlier on. Down here, you can see the layers of wood and possibly leather, and right underneath, you'll be expecting some sheep's wool. And that's the greasy sheep's wool of what keeps the rust off the blade. Every time you push it in and take it out, you're giving an extra little layer of lanolin from the sheep's wool.
But lifting the rusted blade out in one piece is not going to be easy, and overlapping bones don't help.
Because that is actually lying over the top of that. I thought it was going underneath, but if you look, it's lying over the top. So you're going to have some rib with it, but you know it's there.
You happy we take it with them?
Yeah, as long as we know it's there, you know it's there, so that we can get it back eventually.
Okay. Okay. Brilliant.
Whoa. Yep, it's down. Yep, you done?
Okay.
Okay, and then I'm going to go get the box lid.
Get the can.
No. Do you think that is part of the scabbard material?
We'll collect all of it as kind of a flat.
Do you think it is what we're looking at is likely to be part of the scabbard?
It could be.
It could be.
The colour difference it certainly indicates that. Yeah, that's what I'd have. Okay. Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
Well done.
Right, so there's our little rib.
And I need a little I need the tip, and you've got the
I've got
tang.
2.
Right, and then I'll tidy up that soil. Great. Yeah. So add a little support for its ride.
Lifting fragile archaeology is always stressful, even when you've been doing it for years.
Because it has that bend in it, you're never quite sure if it's a full break or, so just to tested it and then took a deep breath and then did it. I think it's a thing, yeah.
And that leaves just the workbox to come up. Pieter wants to block lift, meaning the workbox will come up with its surrounding soil. This will allow her to micro-excavate it back in the lab.
No, could you all just look the other way?
It's like having a baby with all these strangers.
I then secure the precious cargo using veterinary tape.
Yeah.
Have you got that bit?
Yeah, can you move that?
We're not taking this piece.
Or just move him to the side for the moment. He's just a bit of dirt that's fallen away. So all that tucked down.
There.
Yeah.
Ah, I see, yes.
Wrap it around. And actually wrap
Keeping-
it to the, or wrap it to the, yeah, keeping it like
Keeping
that.
it.
Yeah, there you go. So I've got that. So, and then what we might do is we might take Richard's trowel with us. So why don't we use a bit more, cut a bit more, and then we can wrap it to... Richard,
Wrap it.
can I borrow your trowel for a moment, Richard?
You are more than
Great.
How much do you want of tape now?
So what we'll do, so we'll start our best dog paw tape as well. So we'll start there.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Oh,
Strap it onto
we'll
its
strap it.
stretcher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
just tape it. Yeah. Perfect.
Oh, it's quite difficult to get. You have to pull it quite hard to get it
Yeah.
off the roll, don't you?
If you clip it there.
Oh, yeah. Don't let me cut your fingers. There we go.
That's right. Good, for the great good. And let's leave it there.
What, losing a finger?
Great, good. Great. I'll just get a little bit, why not?
Do you know you said you wanted to borrow my trowel? I need it back for Wednesday.
Could I send you it back? No, I'll just X-ray it when I X-ray the object.
It's time to conclude the excavation. The iron object that brought us back did turn out to be an early Anglo-Saxon sword. It was carefully buried with a small boy who was laid to rest on his side, his head propped up by some kind of pillow. Alongside him was an older girl, in her teens, who was also propped up, perhaps as part of a funeral tableau. Around her neck was a necklace, and at her waist was a small metal box, perhaps a reliquary containing relics to keep her safe.
We came here expecting that what we were going to find was going to be a fairly simple grave, but it's turned into one heck of a wild ride. This is almost like a kind of backwards funeral, isn't it? We're remembering them again as we say goodbye to them for the second time, or on to the next phase of their life. Indeed. Perhaps that should be. So I'll pop that in the middle of them there, and we can say goodbye.
Within days, Pieter sets to work stabilising and cleaning the sword back in her lab in Birmingham. Scraping through the mud and rust on the blade, she finds surviving fragments of a wood and leather scabbard. And X-raying the sword reveals evidence that the blade had been pattern welded. Pieter then meets up with Richard at Cranfield University to look at the workbox in detail before she micro-excavates. And for Richard, there's the added bonus of getting his trowel back.
2 days worth of use, that. This trowel has done 1 day's digging and already it's played an essential role in the history of Anglo-Saxon archaeology. That will be worth something one day. That'll be up there with the Sutton Hoo trowel used by Basil Brown. Absolutely essential piece of kit, that.
The workbox is secured, ready to go in the CT scanner. And paleoradiologist Dr. Thomas Delby explains how it will work.
But then ultimately, the X-rays, some of the X-rays will go through. They will reach the detector plate at the back of the instrument, which will record their intensities. And so this detector plate will record a lot of 2D radiograph of the object, a series of them, while the object is spinning.
An archaeological CT scan is a non-destructive imaging technique that uses a rotating X-ray source and multiple receivers to create three-dimensional models of archaeological finds. This approach, known as paleoradiology, uses medical techniques to examine the internal structures of fragile objects without physically damaging them.
you have a little bit of soil around.
Are those designs
But it's
around
more-
the side?
Yeah,
Look at
this
that.
is the
Look at that at the
decoration.
top. What's that?
It's like, well, it's,
This is disc.
yeah,
So that is some sort of. It's really patterned, isn't it?
yeah, it's amazing.
So you've got these
Yeah, that's
lines
great.
at the side, but there's a cross on the top, isn't there? A form. I mean, it seems to me there's a
Well,
cross.
but yeah, but like it looks like a kite.
But it's in a,
little
it's in a
bit,
star. But it,
yeah.
you know, if you revolved it, that's like a.
Yeah.
But it's got these hashes, not dots that I was sort of expecting.
You really see the strip.
It looks like the pattern on a beaker,
Yeah,
an early
doesn't it?
Bronze Age
Yeah,
vessel.
exactly. You're really right. You can see 3 strips here. One here, one there, probably one there, maybe another one.
And that's the lid, isn't it?
Goodness.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, it does look like there's another one on the lid.
Yeah, there is definitely.
Yeah.
But
Elements within this workbox
Yeah.
that the micro excavation will reveal. It just shows how special this object is, because that's really quite naively ornate with those repeating patterns, and then on the end of the box you've got that cross design with those repeating chevrons as well. So you've got, I think it's the decoration as well as what you're going to find on the micro excavation potentially.
Yeah. So the key thing for me really is that when I go down, there doesn't seem to be any part of that box that's still joined together in terms of the main body. So so it helps me just to kind of make sure that I hold and stabilize it and support it in the right way as I go through it.
Now I'm here at Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery to film the next little step in the Cherrington story, which is immensely exciting. I'm going to meet our conservator who's been working on all the objects, and I can't wait to see how she's got on with them. It's amazing to see it all looking so clean and perfect. The sword, though, it looks in so much better condition than I ever believed it could. Do you think we can get a closer look at it?
We can lift it over. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of organics on here, and that is the great thing about the iron. It has minerally preserved those organics on the surface. So at the top here, you can obviously see these pieces of wood coming through here. Yeah. And then you can come down and there's, for whatever reasons, nothing's been preserved here. Okay. And then you get to this little bit here, which is much smoother. Yeah. So that could be a leather, or I think on the surface, which is the bit, on the outside of the scabbard. Yeah. And then I think you can actually see more leather and the shape of the scabbard as it sort of pushes out just there.
Yes, it's got this kind of smooth texture and kind of more reddish, orangey colour.
It's a slightly different hue to the metal itself. And so at the top here, the tang itself, and that's all horn, quite a lot of it.
Yes, but what could you reconstruct it as a horn guard there to stop your hand slipping?
That's right. So you can definitely see the line where it finishes through there.
So we now know the sword had a horn grip and guard which would have protected the holder's hand, and a leather-covered wooden scabbard that would have typically been lined with sheep's wool. The blade inside was pattern welded, which is a metalworking technique where lengths of iron and steel are layered, hammered and polished to produce ornate patterns.
So if it's in its scabbard, then if it had been bent outside its scabbard, you'd never have got it back in again. That's right. Yeah. So I'm assuming it must have been due to the pressure of the earth, or whether it was put in the grave in a bent condition.
Either could be true. It just depends but it takes a lot to bend a sword. Yeah. And the more it corrodes, the more fragile the metal becomes.
So it would break if you tried to bend it?
Today it would, definitely. Mm-hmm. If you tried to bend that today back, you'd just crack it because the metal's too far corroded. But, had there been a collapse in the burial, perhaps.
But the object I really want to look at is the workbox, an object I very rarely get to handle.
You've probably got all this from investigating it, but I'll just give you a bit of a guided tour. They're made from a piece of sheet that can be bent round to make a cylinder, and then I think that we can probably, there's some solder on here, on the lid, So they're two kind of walls that are cylindrical, and they're pushed together very much like a biscuit tin. Yeah. They're just kept together by friction. And then these ends are also soldered one onto each, one on the lid and one on the base. So that's the top and that's the bottom. And if we turn this one over, and then at some point in the making, they're decorated. So you can see the incised decoration on those two. It's very amateurish.
It's very, just on the surface. It's like a light scratching.
Yeah. The decoration is really unusual. If you just saw that in isolation, you wouldn't identify it as early Anglo-Saxon. It's got none of the animal art or the interlace that you'd expect. Gosh, I don't often feel this anymore because I look at so many objects, but just occasionally I think I can almost see the person making this because it's not done very well. It's got such a human quality to it. What a delicate little thing. And then the decoration on the sides is quite different to the decoration on the top and bottom, isn't it? Because it's this double bands with zigzags.
Yeah, zigzags around.
It's made quite a lot better, really, I thought, but it must be the same hand.
It does look like it, yeah. Is it someone just making something for themselves?
That's really
versus someone making something that you would give to someone, or...
Yes, or that you might commission from a craftsman.
Yeah.
Yes, you might understandably be a bit disappointed. Good, that's a really good idea, because I suppose these zigzags are so much easier to do that you could think, well, I could have a go at some zigzags, but once I'm trying to do this concave-sided lozenge with the cross-hatching, that's a bit beyond me, yes. And what we couldn't see when the object was block lifted was the long suspension chain, which allowed the workbox to be hung from the waist.
So obviously in the field we block lifted a couple of things. So this group of objects is what's left of the chain at the bottom of it. And actually what's nice about the CT scanner, so obviously you can see it's really fragmented now, but because it's all encased in its soil when it went through the CT scanner, it all looked like it's all in position, looks like a chain.
So we might be able to get the length.
Exactly, because it's all iron and corroded and broken up in the CT, it looks amazing. But when you conserve it, it all starts falling apart.
Yes. Together with our friends at Operation Nightingale, we have been on quite a journey at Cherrington over the past couple of years. Our back-to-back excavations have confirmed that this was a busy and active Anglo-Saxon cemetery through the 6th and 7th centuries. While we already knew from the princely burial that this place was special, we can now say with certainty that it was so much more than that. The young prince had been buried here as a warrior, a small boy interred with an adult sword in a richly furnished grave. And now we know that perhaps 50 years later, an even younger boy was buried with a sword very close by. To have discovered 2 such burials in the same cemetery is really quite extraordinary. And what of the young woman we discovered lying next to the smallest boy with a workbox by her side? That simple object remains powerful and symbolic, a possible sign of the new Christian faith. In themselves, the sword and the workbox are rare objects worthy of museum display. Each adds something to our knowledge of this remarkable period in English history when kings and priests were gaining power over ordinary people. But together they speak volumes about the folk who lived here, on the far western fringes of early Anglo-Saxon England. Ordinary people whose lives were shaped by war and religion, and who chose objects that speak of these to accompany the children in their graves. These were everyday families experiencing personal tragedy, and it's this human connection that resonates down through the ages to today.
Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses and behind-the-scenes insights.